Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to get started tonight. I'd like to call our regular meeting of September 30th to order. I do wish to acknowledge that we are meeting on the territory of the Sooke Nation, and we are grateful to be here. Okay, before we get into tonight's agenda, I do have a few announcements that I would like to make. So first off, I would like to congratulate and welcome Councillor-elect Dana Lejeunesse. And to also thank all of the candidates who participated in our by-election process. So we will be affirming Councillor Lejeunesse into office at our regular meeting on October the 15th. And this is because of the election proceedings, timelines, and legislation. So that will be our first opportunity to do so. However, once the timeline permits, our corporate officer will be taking Dana Lejeunesse's oath of office as a councillor so that we can begin providing materials and fobs and iPads and the like and all of that briefing, but we will be doing a more formal ceremonial acknowledgement at the start of the 15th meeting. So that's why for now our councillor-elect is in the gallery. So that's first part, so welcome. We look forward to hearing your perspectives and completing our table here in Chambers. Secondly, I'm pleased to announce that the District of Sooke was successful with 5 blooms in this year's Community and Blooms event. I forgot the banner at home. I was given it at the UBCM. However, I did remember the actual report. We scored quite high in most categories, so I provided that to staff so that they could circulate it to council and we could receive it at an upcoming date. Something to think about is that Community Blooms is meant to be a community-driven initiative. So some thought to look at is how can we establish a community council of sorts to actually take this on in times to come. So that is our next piece. The last piece of news is that I was successful in my nomination to receive the UBCM presidency. So that is a 1-year commitment. Thank you very much. Some may feel that this takes me away from Sooke. However, this actually immerses me in all things local government related throughout the province. And we're in an interesting time right now as the provincial government is well into their mandate. And what now does that look like and what is the impact? So what UBCM is basically it's a nonpartisan organization that works on behalf of all local governments in BC, and it's a window into what's happening with government. So there's policy advisors with staff there that filter out the partisan pieces of policy, and this is what is actually happening on the ground with local government, and this is what the membership is saying. So 2 emerging themes that came out of this year's convention was the impact of forestry, 300 trucks convoying into Vancouver, devastating impacts, and a lot of pain in forestry communities that are in fact I would call the backbone of BC. And secondly, climate action. Every week now, students are taking to the streets with a message that's very strong. So what that impact is and what we do at a local level, there'll be work coming forward on that. One moving piece for myself and my folio, of course, is cannabis revenue. We still have not yet received our share of the cannabis revenue. However, the Premier did make a bit of an announcement that we can expect to receive some positive news in the coming weeks and months. And so that's important for us to know and something that we'll be following up on. So anyway, those are some highlights, but we'll get into more. It's a real privilege for me. I'm the 114th president in all of BC in 114 years now. So when I actually look at it in that way, it's quite an honor. So I really appreciate the support on this. Okay, so moving into the agenda now, we have one in front of you. So looking for a motion to approve the agenda for September 30th, 2019 regular council meeting. to be adopted as amended, and that is to move item 21.1, rescindment of policy 9.1, land use activities contrary to current bylaws policy, prior to item number 6.1, development variance permit for 1769 Minnie Road. Moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. So, I suppose that moves us to 12.1 then, right? Or, yes, 12.1, because that has to move ahead, right? Yes. So if we look at 12.1, rescindment of policy 9.1, land use activities contrary to current law. Is there any comment on this from staff?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think there may have been a question about what the district can rely on with respect to bylaw contraventions. And the policy that we're asking council to rescind, that specifically has some case law surrounding it, is that it is for any development application that is being made to legitimize a bylaw contravention. So essentially what that's doing is asking an applicant to go and tear down a set of stairs, for example, come to council in order to ask for permission to build that set of stairs so that they can go and rebuild them again. And there's case law that supports this being it's not really functional. And that is the only thing that's addressed in this policy, and therefore is not enforceable, and therefore asking council to rescind it.
Questions from councillors? Okay, looking for a mover then, that council rescind the land use activities contrary to current bylaws policy 9.1 by Councillor Beddoes, seconded by Councillor Bateman. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Is carried unanimously. Okay, so item 6.1 would be our next item, development variance permit for 1769 Minnie Road. Over to staff, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. The owners of 1769 Minnie Road submitted a building permit application for an addition to the property and interior renovation, and through that process it was determined that the existing accessory buildings did not meet the zoning bylaw requirements for rear and side lot setbacks. As a result, the owners have submitted the proposed variance permit application. The three accessory buildings are highlighted on the right-hand side of the slide, which is the rear of the subject property. Relocating the structures is not the owner's preferred option, and hence the variance request. The variances are detailed on page 1 of the staff report in the table for each of the buildings. So technically, the setbacks required both at the side and the rear are 1.2 meters, and so they're reducing them to the numbers on the screen. Staff visited the site and took photos of the subject property to accompany the referral. Fire Chief Mount reviewed the photos and advised that the fire risk is minimal with the reduced setbacks. As the subject property is well maintained and tidy, there's a low risk from a fire perspective. The photo on the left-hand side shows the back of the subject property and the rear fence line. The photos on the right side demonstrate that the buildings are well maintained. The owner has been responsive and provided all necessary documentation since learning of the setback encroachment, but are not present as they live in Calgary. Staff supports this variance application. That's the end of my presentation.
Okay, thank you. Questions from members of council? Councillor Beddoes?
Myself and Councillor Bateman were over there today having a look at the site and the buildings, and those are very large buildings. When were they erected?
Through your worship, I can't tell you when they were erected because there's no building permit, so I'm not entirely sure.
I guess that's my point. Those buildings are bigger than, I think, 100 square feet roughly is where you need a building permit. Anything over that? They're large buildings, so can we not have the applicant let us know when they were built? Because if they were built without a building permit, I have some concerns.
So my understanding is the applicant is a newer owner of the property and they were pre-existing. And also from our chief building inspector, he's indicated that you can't get a building permit retroactively after the building's already up. If it's a building that's occupied, like for business purposes or as a dwelling, you can require other types of things to ensure safety. like special kinds of safety inspection reports and things, or a structural engineer's report. These are just accessory dwellings. They're not used for, or not accessory, they're just accessory buildings for storage purposes and a carport. They serve, there's no safety risk for someone running a business out of them or living in them.
So we don't have to worry about the footings and what's in there. There's a big electrical cable there. It's not hooked up yet, but obviously, to me, it looks like very new construction. That's why I was concerned about it. The other thing is, there's a for sale sign on the property. So the applicant has purchased the property, or is it just subject to this being done before the deal is through?
I'm not, I just became aware that it's for sale today, actually. So my understanding is that the current owners had purchased it not too long ago, and then I believe they're now selling it. But they're not here to speak to it, and I'm not.
Yeah,
They meet the lot coverage requirements, so they're not over lot coverage. From a fire perspective, there's no risk. And they're accessory dwellings. There's no secondary suite component.
I'm pretty uncomfortable with it, to tell you the truth. I would like to know a little bit more of the history of the legalities of, is it actually being, there's a for sale sign on it. Now, is it, they purchased the property? I'd like to know when and under what conditions, because to me, those buildings, they look like the same construction as what the addition on the house was, and there was a building permit for that, was it not?
Yes, the house was built in 1976, and then there was an addition in 88, and then they applied for the reno this year.
Okay, it's a reno, was it internal reno?
It was an internal reno,
Okay, because that looks like.
like a sunroom and internal.
It looks pretty new construction to me, so.
I mean, ultimately, council has the option to refuse the variance and then force the applicant to tear down the buildings.
If they're over.
The applicant's obviously not here, he's in Calgary. I'd like to hear from the applicant before I'd approve this.
So the other option then is to postpone to a later date to get that information. So that would be an option for council to consider, and just to get that understanding, when were these built, and to have those questions answered, seeing as they're not here tonight, even in writing perhaps to staff. That's something, I'm just putting that out there as an option for consideration.
Yeah, I've personally, through your worship, I'd feel more comfortable. I was actually taken aback when we went and looked at those buildings, and I said, wow, you know, these aren't 10 by 10 sheds that they put up. They're fairly large buildings. And I don't know the ins and outs of the building permits, but we've had no concerns. Was it sent out to the neighbors about this variance? I assume it was, to Ms. Campbell, through your worship?
Variances are advertised per
Okay.
legislative requirements. So just so I'm clear, you would ask staff to get information on when those accessory buildings were built, if the owner's aware, to tell us the dates, and that will help you make your decision on whether you grant a variance.
I'd like to know the size of them. I would like to know when they purchased this property, and are they selling it, or is that for sale sign, are they still, it's a pending deal? You know, sometimes a real estate agent, they find out that there's something non-conforming, and then they say, okay, we're not going to go through with the sale until this part is resolved. But I can't see how that would be with the person that actually, it has to be the landowner themselves that apply for this, correct?
Yes, or they have to have permission by the landowner to apply for it.
Okay, well, then I'd like that cleared up. I'm not comfortable with proceeding with this myself.
So
Okay.
council needs to, so council's asking for the specifics on when they were built and the dates and the sizes to
And the
inform your
status of
decision for the variance.
The status of the sale.
The
Yeah.
status of the sale, okay.
Well, that would be, should council wish to postpone this decision tonight. So that motion has not come on the floor yet?
I will
We'll
make
see.
that motion
Okay,
that we
that's-
postpone this to further information.
Okay, so
second it.
postpone to the next regular meeting, say, and seconded by Councillor McMath, that this variance be postponed to the next regular meeting. So that's been moved and seconded. So the questions that I hear from councillor is just understanding when did the landowner the applicant, should the applicant be the landowner, when did they acquire the property, and were these structures there, or when were they built? And is this variance coming forward as a condition of the sale?
And the size of the building.
And what are the size of the buildings? Anything, was that it, Counselor Beddoes, just so I have what?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I'm sorry that the people live in Calgary, because it'd be nice to have them here. We could be all cleared up. So I guess my concern is that, you know, is it one of these big forgiveness things that somebody built? Because I got the impression that it was the homeowner that built this fairly recently, but I don't know. I guess we'll have to find out. Anyways, we have the motion and second.
Counselor McMath, do you have other questions as a seconder or comments to that motion?
Just really looking for clarity, like if they are selling it right now, why are we here? Like, what's the intent behind it? So, but we'll cover that when we come back to it.
Okay, Counselor St. Pierre?
It seems, at least to me, like we don't necessarily have a lot of recourse regardless, and we don't actually have a risk to the public. Looking at the picture and looking at the maps, it seems that the setbacks don't necessarily impinge on their neighbors. They've got some nice greenery around it, and there's a fair amount of distance between any other buildings. There doesn't seem to be a fire risk. We can't actually retroactively issue a building permit. I'm not sure what we can do even if we get the information. I suspect that we don't want to use a blunt tool like asking them to remove the buildings. So I don't know if we're, I'm not sure why we would wait. I mean, we can get all this information. I'm not sure if their intention to sell or not sell would change our decision in any way. I guess I'm curious as to whether or not any of the information we're asking for would actually change the direction we want to go in eventually. And so I'm putting that out.
Counselor Beddoes?
Through your worship, yes, it very much may change my vote on whether to go ahead with the variance or a request for that it be demolished. I mean, I really want to know the intent of this. I mean, where did it come from? If it is just an oops error, or is it a flagrant, oh, we'll build it and we'll beg forgiveness at a future time, then I think that sets a terrible precedent for this community. So I really want some answers. I may in fact vote for the variance in the end, but there is a possibility that I don't. So I want some facts before I make that decision.
Okay, Counselor Bateman?
Yeah, my thoughts, we have this issue of the applicant states they were unaware of the setback and building permit requirements for non-residential buildings. And of course, we do have a building regulation bylaw, 2001, and it states every owner must obtain and hold a valid permit from the building inspector before starting and during any work to which this bylaw applies, and those accessory buildings do apply, I believe. There are penalties here. Every person who contravenes any provisions of this bylaw commits an offense punishable upon summary conviction and is liable to a fine not exceeding $10,000. So it strikes me that if we as a district do grant this variance, we might also impose a fine on the landowner. I don't know if that's possible. But in such a way, as Councillor St. Pierre states, they have encroached on the setbacks, and it'd be, and people do make mistakes. However, there's a cost to making a mistake, and perhaps the district can impose that fine.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is just to postpone this decision. We'll get that further information, then entertain the variance at the next regular meeting. Okay, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Okay, so that'll return with some more info. Meeting minutes here for adoption. We have our September 9th regular meetings, September 16th special council meeting, September 17th committee of the whole. So these can all be adopted together as circulated. Looking for a motion to adopt by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Bateman. All those in favor? Opposed? Is carried unanimously. Did I miss something?
Thank you, Your Worship. For the development variance permit, we did not have an opportunity for any public members who may have been here to speak to that, so perhaps we should go back in case there's anybody here.
So even when a motion to postpone comes up, because there'll be public input at the next meeting, right?
public input should have occurred before council made that resolution.
Okay, that would be helpful, actually, if that can be, because I'm reading this, you know, and I always, so it would just help that that sort of be added in here so that I don't miss that. So I'll look for any public input on the variance, and then we'll take this into consideration for the next meeting as well. No. Okay, thank you. Okay, on to delegations. 8.1 is Mr. Mark Offley, building on Kaltasin. And there is a microphone, if you could please turn it on, sir, and as soon as you start, we'll have 5 minutes for you tonight. The default is 2, so it just needs to be switched to 5.
Hello, I'm Mark Offley. I'm here today to follow up on the fact that a permit application was applied for as a garage and suite next door to my property, which partly arrived on a truck on the 7th of June, but was said to be just a workshop by my neighbour less than a month before. You have received my presentation regarding this. I immediately visited the District of Sooke Planning Department, and as per my presentation on the timelines and pictures from the 7th of June to the 25th of September, I've gone through the ordeal of contacting various parties and dealing with numerous people at the District of Sooke, and frustrations including mislaid or lost documents that were delivered by hand that had to be resubmitted after 3 weeks and up to a month in delays, replying to my final letter pointing out again that the setback, amongst other points, as per the site plans, were not correct, despite 3 replies from the District of Sooke to the contrary. This was proven on the 18th of August after I handed to the owner a copy of his own permit application site plan, and he stopped work on the building, building the stairs at the side with the contractor along the property line, and at the end of August, the stairs were constructed at the back of the building instead. The final email reply from the Finance Department on the 26th of September stated the owner has decided to relocate the stairs to the back of the building. And also, unless the stairs exceeded 0.6 metres, which is 1.96 feet wide, there would not have been a requirement for this relocation. But it was always going to be 4 feet wide, and therefore less than the setback requirement based on the position of the house that was marked out and the foundations placed and viewed on 3 occasions by the building inspector. So my conclusion is the roof height was not properly stated in the permit application, and the mid-roof was not stated as the highest point of the roof. The setback shown on the permit application included the stairs within 3 metres. This was not the case, despite at least 2 inspections during the process. There are also up to the August the 13th, at least one, as per the District of Sooke, a non-business licensed accessory building on the property shown as the permit application as to be removed at a later date. This has been used as a year-round Airbnb and for the past 3 years, and in addition to the new accessory building. I'm not the only person concerned with these building permit issues, including a presentation to the Council on 27th of May, and others have spoken in the community, and no doubt more to come in light, unless this situation is properly streamlined and resolved. For example, how likely is it a problem going to be resolved after it's already been allowed to happen? If my genuine concerns had been taken seriously and attended to correctly from the very beginning, there have been far less correspondence over a period of nearly 4 months during the process, with which there's anxiety and frustrations. My valuable time, the District of Sooke staff, Mayor and Council's time. The owner of the building and the contractors have all been privy and mutually involved. This presentation only includes a fraction of the amount of supporting pictures and correspondence that I've submitted and received over the last 4 months. These are the letters, which I'm obviously not going to go through, that you have copies of in hard copy. This was the building that arrived on the 7th of June, and it has a side door entrance, which is close to the property line. And this is the site plan that shows that there was a 4 feet width included in the 3 meter distance between the property line and the building. So therefore, the building should have been placed in the correct position, and during the inspections would have been noted to be in the wrong place. This is the change that I myself was able to insist on, not wanting myself to have to be doing the building inspector's job. And it's now placed at the back of the building, which is not, therefore doesn't create a problem for the setback of 3 meters. And as you can see, this is no way or shape anything like a workshop that I was told it was going to be. It's a very big intrusion on our property, and including the fact that they have an active year-round Airbnb that has lots of visitors every week. So that's the end of my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Offley, for providing that to us. Questions from members of council? I think having received this, an option for council. I'll go to Councillor Beddoes.
No, I'm just still thinking, just, I'll comment in a minute.
Okay, Councillor Bateman.
Well, yeah, I guess this permit application, was it indeed for a garage and not a 2-story?
No, the actual permit was for a garage and a suite.
Above?
Well, whether it was above or below, it didn't particularly state, but it said a garage with a suite.
Right.
So that was why I came here to start with as soon as the building arrived, because and the owner was away that week. So when I saw this building arrive on a truck, I thought, well, how can this be a workshop? So I immediately that day came here to ask what the permit had been applied for. Now, it was mentioned that at the time when I met the planning department that there was no mention of the extra addendum bed and breakfast building. But it was but because of the freedom of information, I was able to get the copy of the application, the site plan. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known that the building was not in the right position if I hadn't have seen the plan, which I shouldn't be doing because the building permit inspector should be doing this.
Okay. Other questions? Councillor Bateman?
I believe in your correspondence there was some reference to building the fence with your neighbor.
Yes, that's correct.
So was the fence intended to block the view
Yes.
of a 1-story
Exactly.
structure?
This is why we built the whole fence between us. And during the course of the building that we did, and I split the cost with him, as you saw from one of the pictures, or you have correspondence copies, the building that is the Airbnb was the sort of height I was expecting the building to be, like a general workshop type height. So therefore the fence, which we even though it's no higher than 2.5 metres, we made it as high as possible so it would not intrude on our own property. Well, you can imagine this, supposedly I've been told now, after asking many times, is supposed to be officially 8 metres high, right? Now, of course, I still could question that because I haven't been told the truth so far by, the owner, and also I question the fact that he was allowed to start building the stairs, knowing that the stairs would then create an issue with the setback.
Yeah.
Other questions? Councillor McMath?
Sorry, I think I just missed it. In the original application, it was for a garage and a suite,
Yes,
which is what this is now, correct?
yes.
But when you spoke with your neighbor, they verbally told you something else?
Yes, they did on numerous times, told me that it was going to be a workshop.
Okay.
Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind at some time to see the actual application for this permit. Is I don't know, there's some discrepancy exactly what, now when he applies, when he applies for the permit, would he not have to submit a drawing of the building?
There was a
So-
drawing. Everything was submitted with a scale drawing, a site plan,
Okay,
which I have here, if you'd like to see any of them.
I would like to see it,
All
actually.
right, well, I can certainly give you them.
So is it the case that what was applied for and what exists now don't match?
Well, what was applied for, I was questioning because I actually managed, obviously, to get the site plan, which then enabled me to check it against the actual building. Now, let me just give you the, the height, of course, was a great shock to me, in any case. I mean, you can see it's towering, it looks like a church, a lot of people have told me, right?
Councillor Bateman and I were over looking at it today.
All right. I have it very handily here. Oh, here it is.
Okay, so just on this here, is that we're receiving information that isn't part of the presentation? So it may be appropriate that council seek out a staff report and have that come back to us? Or I can't,
Yeah, there was.
just like to get some feedback from staff here, please.
The site plan was put in my PowerPoint, so it's just, the only other difference was that they submitted a height that showed halfway up the roof height, and you're supposed to show up to the maximum height of the roof. So how that was allowed to go through in any case without actually checking and asking them to resubmit the plans to show the full height in any case, because I really don't know whether it's 8 metres, which I've been told, or 9 or 9.2. Because to me, if the inspector was allowing the setback to be incorrect, I don't know whether the height is also incorrect. Plus, I also just need to clarify about this additional Airbnb that's being run on, which is 350 square feet, which is over the, non-permit requirement, and has obviously active transient dwellings in there, as well as now this new building, of which I don't know what it's going to be used for.
Okay.
So these are the concerns I have, and I would appreciate you following up and helping me get some answers on it, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Offley. Over to staff, please.
Through your worship, just to confirm, council is not supposed to be involved in building permit and reviewing and applying legislation to building permits. That's what the staff's responsibility is. In regards to Mr. Offley's concerns with the property, I believe he's referring to the email I sent him on Thursday.
Yes.
Which confirmed that according to the plan submitted, the building is not located within the 3-meter setback, and the staircase that he's referring to, there's the zoning bylaw, section 319 has setback exemptions, and stairwells fall into that category, so there's not a guarantee that the stairwell wouldn't have been permitted to be where the owner originally wanted to put it. But just to be a good neighbor, they've decided to move it to the back of the property.
No, it wasn't to be a good neighbour. It was because they knew they were
Okay,
caught
Mr.
red-handed.
Offley, if you could please let our staff
That
finish
was
responding.
Well, I had
what
to
you
clarify
heard
that
from
point.
the owner, was he didn't want to, he made the decision, it wasn't going to be required from the building permit perspective to move the stairs to the back of the building. And as Mr. Offley knows, as far as the potential Airbnb on the property, that's a bylaw enforcement issue, which he has the appropriate contact information to follow up with staff to deal with that. Currently, right now, there is no violations in the building permit that would permit changes or any stop workage to happen on this property.
Okay, so as, in terms of staff receiving and reviewing this information, this new building is in compliance with the zoning in our building regulation bylaw. There's nothing out of order.
Correct. Staff have been, building inspectors have been to the site multiple times and have inspected everything, and they have there's no present violations that would need to be remedied.
Okay, I'm seeing some hands. Councillor St. Pierre?
Just to confirm, because Mr. Offley seems fairly certain that the height may be a question, and certainly when you look at the pictures, it looks awfully high. So are we certain that the building actually fits within our codes in terms of the height?
Through your worship to Council St. Pierre. So I believe on the permit, the building permit application form, they might have indicated 8 meters, but they are allowed up to a maximum of 9 meters. So as long as they're at that or below, they meet the bylaw requirements. I'm not sure when the pictures were taken. I know there's some there where the building's
Yes.
jacked up on skids, so it would be higher than its intent when it's lowered.
It only went up, it didn't, it just kept climbing up.
Okay, Councillor McMath?
So just to go back to the staircase, through your worship staff, had the staircase been built on the side, what would the process have been?
Through your worship to Councillor McMath. So staircases are exempt in the side yard or rear yard as long as they do not protrude more than 0.6 meters into the setback. So whatever was shown on the building permit would have shown that either it didn't exceed it, or it was, like, I'm not familiar with the building permit application, but the zoning bylaw allows those types of things to enter into the encroachment areas up to a certain extent. So 0.6 meters in the case of an unenclosed stairwell.
Okay.
Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, through your worship to Ms. Campbell, again, about the height, I see in the drawing, they show the mid-roof line is 6.24 meters, but you say that under the bylaw, they can go to 9 meters?
That's correct.
Okay, because it would appear, I don't have the exact measurements, that if they did go to the peak of the roof, it would be 9 meters or under, just on my guess there. Okay, thank you.
Councillor McMath?
So for peace of mind, will we have the inspector go to measure the height of the building?
Through your worship, yes, all of the measurements will be done before final occupancy would be issued to confirm everything's in compliance, but I can say the inspectors have been there multiple times and don't have any concerns. The chief building official advised that the height of the building is 8 meters, so it's well within the 9 meters allowed. But final measurements and everything will be undertaken before final occupancy is issued.
Okay, great. And then through yourself, to the applicant or the contestant.
Delegation.
You will, from this point now, make a complaint if you wish to bylaw regarding the Airbnb suite.
Yep, okay.
And then I think the bulk of your frustration comes from like the verbal agreement that you had with your neighbor about what it would look like. And
Yes,
then,
but that's how it started, and of
Yeah.
course, as it went along, then the actual wrongdoing happened, you know, with the bylaw infraction. So that made it worse.
Which bylaw infraction?
The staircase, being too close to the
perhaps,
property.
perhaps not.
No, it was definitely, I can prove that.
You think it was over the width?
It would have been over the width. If you were to go and see it, you'd see that the foundation for building the stairs was 4 feet, which was actually in the application. So it was always going to be 4 feet wide. But the building is 3 meters from the property line. So how can you put 4 feet inside that 3 meters?
Had that gone through and had that come here with your discussion today, I'm sure we would have remedied it.
Well, that's the other point being that if I hadn't have stopped it, it would have been built, then we would have all been here for more weeks trying to undo it.
Right. Sometimes it's part of the process.
Right.
So the stairs are now where they should be.
Yes.
And then, so you'll go to bylaw with the other
Right.
complaints, and
Yes.
then we'll get the peak of the roof measured.
I appreciate that.
And then I am really sorry because it's quite high.
It is. It doesn't fit with the environment or the area or the nature that we had there. You know, it just sticks out like a sore thumb. It's really ugly.
And it's hard to see that you split an investment on a fence with that sole purpose in
Exactly,
mind, so
and not to be told.
I'm sorry that you are going through
Well,
that.
thank you, I appreciate that.
Councillor St. Pierre?
I think Mr. Offley's also brought something to our attention, and I'm not sure if we actually have any bylaws regarding Airbnbs. And I think this is potentially a fairly large issue. It's come up, with various other local government groups. I'm wondering, do we have anything happening in terms of that sort of thing through your worship to staff?
Through your worship to Councillor St. Pierre, that's a great question. Right now in our zoning bylaw, we have boarding and lodging, short-term vacation rental, a multitude of definitions that mean different things, including bed and breakfast. Airbnb is just the online term for short-term vacation accommodation or bed and breakfast without the breakfast. And our bed and breakfast definition allows you to not have breakfast served to you as well. So most of the Airbnbs in Sooke apply for a license with the use of boarding and lodging. And it complies, but they do require a business license. We actually are reviewing that right now. We have a master's student from VIU that's working on all of our definitions in the first two sections of the zoning bylaw. And that's one of the tasks, is to combine and clear up all of our short-term rental type of definitions into a cleaner, more concise definition. Yeah, the use is permitted in all zones. Boarding and lodging is generally permitted, yeah.
It's permitted as long as there's a business license.
Yes.
Which this one doesn't have.
Okay, so that'll be the part that you'll need to follow up with bylaw.
Okay.
Mr. Offley, thank
Yeah.
you for your delegation
Thank you
tonight.
for your time.
Other follow-up questions,
Yeah.
comments? Or, sorry, Councillor St. Pierre, I seem to be, go ahead.
Through your worship to staff, I'm curious as to whether or not this student might be able to look specifically at some of the issues that other municipalities have been having with Airbnbs, specifically in terms of the pressures that it puts on the rental market and the availability of affordable housing, and whether or not we can actually react appropriately, or if that's just not within something that would actually work.
Through your worship, that would be well beyond the scope of the work of this student. They're basically looking at best practices for the definitions of short-term vacation accommodation at this point. We do have a housing needs assessment coming forward, and maybe there'll be some information in there.
That'll be the timely piece for that to come up. Councillor Beddoes, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to comment that staff has stated that if it isn't in compliance with the permit, that it'll come to light at the time of the occupancy permit. And the other problem is taken care of. Like I said, Councillor Bateman and I did look at it, and I sympathize with you on how it looks, but if they've done everything, legally to get the permit, then I'm not sure we can do a heck of a lot about it. I certainly wouldn't like it at the end of my driveway, but that's the way it is.
Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, I'll just confirm that. I wouldn't want it at the end of my driveway either, and I do understand your privacy has been shattered to a fair degree here. I agree with Councillor St. Pierre around the Airbnbs. I looked them up. 168 are in Sooke at the moment. And I noted that the City of Kelowna issues annual Airbnb licenses at $350 per. So that would be $58,000 to the district, which would cover our community grant budget. The question I had through you to staff is, here's a situation where we're seeing a secondary suite, a tertiary suite of a kind, being permitted, and with the vague promise of the accessory building to be removed at a later date. That strikes me as an interesting, but maybe it's normal practice.
Through your worship, just to confirm, my understanding is that until they've decided for 100% what they're doing with the newly constructed building, there's no potential violations. There's multiple uses permitted on the lot. Perhaps planning can confirm, but there's multiple uses permitted on the lot. And so right now, they're not in contravention of that. I believe there's discussions underway of what the intent of will be once this will be operational and occupancy issued, is what their intent is with the Airbnb that is there on the property right now. But until that time, we don't know. No final decisions have been made.
I think as the housing needs assessment comes forward and we hear the pressure of the lack of available or attainable rentals, we will need to introduce a policy in terms of how Airbnbs are being resolved because of parking, the sewer, I think of the sewer impact of an Airbnb, and the changeover is far greater than just, say, having someone living in a unit with the turnover, the traffic and the like, the change in the neighborhood. So it may be a bit more timely. The competition between an established bed and breakfast, say, versus someone who's renting out their basement, right? It's different, right? So I think that'll be sort of an emerging file. So it's something to contemplate for a notice of motion, I think, because it's been happening and it's just erupting all over. Okay. Thank you very much. So I'd like to welcome our second delegation forward, please, 8.2, Mr. Don Brown and Mr. Rick Eby for the Sooke Multi-Belief Initiative. And gentlemen, there is 5 minutes for you as well.
Now, I must recuse myself as a member of the Multi-Belief Initiative. Delegation not asking for a decision.
Are they asked, well, I don't know if they're asking for
Well,
a
I think
decision.
they might.
We haven't
be.
heard the, yeah, we haven't heard the presentation yet.
He doesn't have to leave. We like him very much.
I know.
We're kind of fond of him ourselves, but.
He does ask searching questions, which embarrasses us sometimes, but yeah.
There you go. Okay, gentlemen, if you could please turn on the microphone. Thank you.
There we go.
Yes. Good evening, Your Worship and Councillors. Tonight, the Sooke Multi-Belief Initiative is requesting the District of Sooke approve the location for the sign that says Sooke, a compassionate community. And how do we make this work?
Point it that way.
That way?
Yeah. You may have turned it off. Slide.
Battery's low. There we go. Sign just pointed there?
This one right here.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
The Sooke Multi-Belief Initiative is requesting the District Council to give permission to put this sign up that you see behind us on the west side of the kiosk at Evergreen Mall.
The District Council endorsed the chapter for the Charter for Compassion on June 11th, 2018, and the Sooke Compassion Action Plan was approved on April 13th, 2019, and I would just like to thank each of the councillors individually for signing personally the Charter for Compassion.
We have spoken with the owner of Evergreen Mall, on which the kiosk is located, and he has agreed to the placement of the sign on the property.
The kiosk, though, is the District of Sooke's structure, and approval is needed to put this 36 by 24 inch metal sign on the west side of the kiosk.
The sign will proclaim Sooke's recognition by the Charter for Compassion International as one of over 100 communities worldwide where the Charter for Compassion has been affirmed by local government.
The sign will also remind Sooke residents of our ongoing commitment to help one another.
The prominent location we believe to be important in order to convey these two messages.
If the location is approved, official unveiling of the sign will occur on the afternoon of Saturday, October 26th, and mayor and councillors would be invited.
And as you can see, this picture is where we are requesting the sign to be placed on the kiosk.
And thank you very much on behalf of the Sooke Multi-Belief Initiative, and I think we did that under 3 minutes.
And you did, just that, gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you.
Very time
So,
share.
just a few points of clarity is that the kiosk is, we do lease it actually from the Evergreen. So we have a lease agreement between the district and the Evergreen Center for the kiosk. So it's nice that they gave permission, but actually they don't have authority over our kiosk. So we determine what is displayed there. So that,
We were told by staff we needed, because it was on their property, we needed first permission from them. And then we
Okay.
needed to come back and ask for permission for you.
So, okay, anyway, it's all good, everyone's been asked, so that's fine.
We've been really working hard at permissions.
Okay.
I asked my mother, everybody, you know.
We also, through the Sooke Program of the Arts, had indicated having some sort of display panel. So I just now can't remember where on the kiosk we had resolved for that to go.
Wasn't it where the map was?
I don't remember. So that's just something that, and I'm not 100% sure where the movement on that file is, but I just don't want to agree to, okay, we will put that there and then find out that we had already committed the space for another community project. So we'll just need to sort that out. 'cause I
Like
don't-
First Nations, we're here first, sorry.
I don't understand what that has to do with this.
Nothing.
Oh, okay. All right.
Thank you.
There's another resolution I'm saying. And then, okay, and then I just want to confirm that this is because what I understand is that this is a non-denominational organization. It's
Completely
not,
secular, completely secular.
yeah, completely secular, so there's no religious affiliation. So that's important to note with any of our signage, is that we cannot support any particular religion, but in this case, it isn't.
The Sooke Multi-Belief Initiative is multi-religion.
Okay,
All
so it
faiths and
actually
no
is
faiths.
multi-secular.
Yeah, multi-secular.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness, this is like just going right all over my head completely, but thank you, Mr. Brown. Council, I'll just shift it to Councilor Meadows at this point.
I'll try to be quiet, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank
Can't
you.
help myself.
This is through your worship, to your worship and staff. Do we not have a policy on signage on that kiosk? Because my concern is, I don't know, I have a big concern about this one, but what happens when the next person come along and say, boy, they have their sign on, I want my sign on, and then you have a whole host of people that we have to decide. So is there a policy to the staff, to your worship?
Through your worship, Councillor Beddoes, I'm not aware of a policy specific to that kiosk. I mean, I'd have to look at the lease agreement if there's some language in that. But regarding the permission from the district, he's correct. Our sign bylaw requires that the owner of the property give permission on the application form. So that's where that came from. Got it. Yeah.
Okay, just a little clarification is, the only concern I have is setting a precedent and the other people wanting to put their signs on there. Pretty soon, it could look like a billboard with all sorts of things. So I have a little concern about that, not so much about this particular one, but again, about setting precedent. I don't know whether just out for discussion.
Can I address it?
Councillor McMath, go ahead, please.
I have zero concerns. Shocker, we disagree. In the interim, can we put the sign up while we're waiting to hear back from the others? And then if it turns out that that just happens to be the one spot where they wanted their sign, we could look at moving this delegations to another position on the kiosk?
Yeah, that's fine, because I don't think that the cabinet, it was a display board where there would be community events and the like posted on it. It was meant to be a designed sort of community board with public notices and stuff. And obviously that it's sitting right now, we haven't even crafted said items, so that is possible where it could shift if there's a conflict. Yes.
May I make that motion?
Okay, so your motion is that
The sign be added to the kiosk in the location requested by this delegation.
okay, is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Any further comments on the motion that you made?
No.
Okay, Councillor Beddoes.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. If we run into a problem down the road, we'll deal with it down the road. But for now, I think that'd work out quite well.
And we'll talk to the owner and make sure he doesn't approve anymore, so we'll be okay.
Still has to come to us in the end, so that's fine. Councillor St. Pierre on the motion.
I would suggest that if the kiosk gets a little burdened, and if location has already been used for something or needs to be, there's also, I believe, the installation that's going on at Phillips Road and Route 14 at some point with the service clubs. Might be an appropriate spot if they were willing to talk to them. Just a thought.
Yeah, okay. So we do have a motion here that council authorizes Sooke Multi-Belief Initiative sign be placed on the west side of the kiosk in the Evergreen Mall. So that's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on this item? Okay. See none, the one thing I'll say is that I will be on vacation on October the 26th, so I think you had a date there, but please send it forward to council, and so that other members of council, the acting or deputy mayor, would be able to attend. I unfortunately, pardon me?
We can always change the date.
Okay. It's going to be a little challenging to accommodate my schedule. I don't want you to hold off, so just, I'm with you, but I'm not physically there. So anyway, all those in favor? Opposed, and that's carried unanimously. Okay, thank you, gentlemen. If we could please return Councillor Bateman to the room, please. Okay. I'm just silencing microphones. We don't know yet. We'll receive the information. Okay, so next item up is report of the Chief Administrative Officer. Ms. Gray?
Well, in my acting period, nothing to report, but, yeah, nothing to report.
I'll just share that our CAO is currently moving house. So in the way of moving house to Sooke, so that's why he's not here. So thank you, Ms. Gray, for handling matters in his absence. Okay, next up is public question and comment period. So this is for any items on tonight's agenda, please.
Hi, I'm Britt Santowski, and I'm talking to the flag policy coming up. I think it's great. I think it's wonderful. My only wish is that you also tell somebody by press release or anything why a flag is flying at half-mast. It has happened on occasion at the fire station, RCMP, and I get the call, and then I have to phone the district to find out why. You guys already know why. So just, if you could, my ask is, if you do it, tell someone. Thank you.
Yeah, we may not know with the RCMP though, until, because then usually that prompts us to then reach over to them and ask them why their flag is lowered.
Okay, technically they report to you though.
Right, but if there's incidents, we don't necessarily know. So we're
Right.
working on communication,
Which is
internally and
awesome.
externally.
Thank you.
But thank you very much. Other questions tonight, comments?
Les Haddad and Sooke, and I just want to mention I actually have an Airbnb. It's to speaking to the Airbnb issue by the garage, and just that when you mention Airbnb, to be fair and I don't know what the word is, Airbnb, short-term vacation rental, or bed and breakfast, they're all the same. To exclude one is quite unfair, and I find it quite offensive. If I serve breakfast on my Airbnbs, everyone gonna be nice to me now? That's all. I think you should include them all instead of singling out. Thank you.
Very good point, Mr. Haddad, thank you. Other question and comments tonight? Okay. Well, moving on. All right. Thank you, everyone. So we'll move into our consent agenda. So this is item 11, and this is where there are a number of items, and council would look to approve them all in a block unless council wishes to extract any for individual debate. So right now, the recommendation is that council adopt items 11.1 and 11.2 by general consent. Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, I'd like to see the strategic plan portion removed for just a little bit of discussion.
Okay, so that will be the second bullet. So we'll extract that out, which is...
Actually, the first bullet.
Oh, well, right, the first bullet. Okay. Well, I think because they're sort of blocked together as committee of the whole, we can maybe, why don't you raise some discussion? I was just seeing if anything needed to be individually debated there.
Yeah, I guess I just had a few thoughts in terms of whether we perhaps would like to fix a date. You know, I think the strat plan was always deemed to be annually renewable, and we would dedicate time. I'm just wondering whether that's spring, summer, fall. So I raise that as a question, as opposed to we've got annually at an open meeting. And I'm thinking it's more like a spring kind of house cleaning, getting us set for the year ahead.
I'm thinking spring as well would be timely, because that's when we're right in the midst of budget deliberations. We have all of our data from the year-end closing off, New Year sort of coming in. That would make sense to sort of reinvigorate that. We'd look at where we're at in terms of the financial plan, items that were budgeted in a year, did they all occur, what's over, under, what do we still want to carry forward? So springtime would make sense. I tend to agree with you there. All right, good.
And I was also wondering, you know, we had that, what's it
Infographic.
called?
The visual scribe.
The visual scribe. And Councillor St. Pierre, early in their term, was talking about the need to put some stuff up on these walls.
Yes.
So
I'm glad
I think
you
that would
raised
be a good.
So a couple of comments on that, or just Sim seen a hand there. Ms. Gray?
Sorry, just a suggestion is you could refer this to the CAO to confirm the timing of the strategic plan review, because then we can look at the timing of the budget, because we are looking at changing the timing of our budget cycle slightly to bump things up. So if you say the spring, we might already be well on the budget process, well through the budget process by that time. So we could leave it to the CAO's discretion to confirm the appropriate timing to bring this back for annual review.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, do you require a resolution for that? No, okay. So I'll just talk, so I'm really looking forward to seeing that one come down. That strategic plan is dated, so, and we do have what's an infographic, a visual document that there's just some light edits, so that's going to go, the thought was that the new one would go over there. And then we also have 2 pieces of artwork that were done by our community at Canada Day. So those were the one stroke, one color that Councillor Parkinson had initiated. So those are currently getting bordered, framed, and they're quite large. So sort of thought from talking to the Sooke Program, the Arts Committee, that their thoughts were that they should be together with sort of like a description in a frame, so that those would more appropriately both fit on this wall, because I don't think the 2 together will fit on that wall. So we can look to see if they'll fit on that wall there, and if not, they'll go on this wall, and then we could put one or the other. But yeah, so we're just waiting for those to come, and then those will be up on the walls for everyone to enjoy. With that vibrant
And just
color.
my final point on this is that I believe Ms. Santowski is correct, and that we need to be beating our drum a little more resoundingly. So I'd like to see a press release go out on this strat plan with some clarity about our vision and the things we've, as I stated at the committee of the whole, we've accomplished a fair number of things already as a council. So I'd like to see a press release go out on that.
And we can do that now that we're hitting the adoption phase, and just sort of outline perhaps the process, the community engagement that occurred. We can include the visual scribe in it, and just have this, and then we'll look for our CAO to come back with an appropriate timeline. That's sort of in his task list there, and then we can share that out. Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, I'm in fully agreement with Councillor Bateman. I tell you the truth, that Council of the Whole, when Councillor Bateman started reading out some of those things that we accomplished, at first I moaned, which I often do, but I was actually quite impressed with some of the things that we did tick off, and I think that the public should know that we are making progress, and we're trying to make progress, and we will be making progress. So very good.
Good point, Councillor. Anything else? No. Okay, so I'm Councillor McMath?
I was just going to move it.
Okay, perfect. So Councillor McMath is moving that Council adopt items 11.1 and 11.2 by general consent, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Any further discussions? See none. All those in favor? Opposed? Is carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Okay, we've dealt with item 12.1, so we're looking at item 12.2. 5490 Sooke Road application fees. This came out following in the public hearing and some discussion in regards to feedback received from members of the public. And we had asked staff to provide a bit of a backgrounder and some history, so here it is. And the recommendation is that council receive this report for information. For information. In discussion, well, we could discuss it, but in the end, we would receive it for information. Or unless you choose to move otherwise. Discussion, Councillor St. Pierre.
Okay. I think most people are probably familiar with this particular property, so I'm going to try and speak up. I've been asked to try and speak up. This would be the property with the vet clinic owned by and operated by Amanda Booth. My understanding, and I believe the report from staff is fortunately very clear and comprehensive, I think makes it clear that Dr. Booth made an application with the CRD to actually bring her operation into compliance. She spent the money, she spent the time, she brought it into compliance. An OCP changed things in terms of bringing it back to RU2, and the words vet clinic were not included, even though it was considered agricultural. And I don't actually understand that one yet, why agriculture doesn't include a vet clinic, but that's something that we can leave aside for now. I think that in this particular case, it's actually fairly clear, based on some of the correspondence, that says it is unclear as to what happened during the transition from the Sooke zoning bylaw number 270, of which the 2009 letter refers, and our current Sooke zoning bylaw number 600. There have been significant changes in staff and council since that time. Now, I think that implies to me that things could have gone differently. I don't want to assign blame, but I think things could have gone differently. And given that this operation was brought into compliance at cost, I believe that it is the responsibility of the district to at least see what they can do to defray that cost. As has been pointed out, it's a very successful operation, it's a successful business, but that's not actually a reason to ding someone when they've already paid. There was some concern. I would actually also like to point out that one of our staff's many duties is to minimize the district's legal and financial liability, and they do a really good job, but they don't have the prerogative to bend the rules, even if it seems fair to do so. That's not their job, okay? That's council's responsibility if we deem it so. I'm willing to set a precedent where Sooke residents that have paid and gone through a rezoning process can actually have some relief from council if that comes to pass. What we're really looking at here is a situation where people that really feel that the ball may have been dropped have a recourse with council. And I don't think this actually sets a firm precedent that anybody is going to come forward. I just don't think we're going to have that many people where an entire area has been rezoned to a new land use designation and their designation has not been included. We have documentation showing that letters were put forward, that some due diligence in terms of communication was taken care of, and I see that that's been done. But that would actually put the onus on everyone to, and maybe that's the case, maybe that is actually the situation, is the onus on everyone to attend all the OCP meetings, make sure what their neighbors are thinking should happen to where they live, make sure that they're there to argue with them, make sure that the land use designation doesn't change to something unsuitable, but that seems a bit heavy. And I don't think that's quite the case here. So I would suggest that even though council contingency is very low, perhaps we could consider in next year's budget or do something to show that we appreciate that an effort was made. I appreciate their willingness to work with us on this. That was really good. But I don't think that it's entirely up to them to pay the bill on this one.
Councillor Bateman.
Well, I'd agree with much of what Councillor St. Pierre says there. Dr. Booth did do her very best in the 90s to create a situation where she would be compliant, and she was up until 2006 zoning bylaw. Indeed, at the time, there were opportunities for the public to there were open houses and that sort of thing. And she, like many of in our community, was either unaware of the OCP consultations at that time. And of course, some people were unaware there was a by-election on Saturday. So she's not alone. She's too busy tending to her flock. So I see that given the lack of ground truthing, my new favorite word, on the district's part, we might want to amend the OCP, or not amend, forgive the OCP amendment fee of $1,500. I see the rezoning and public hearing fees come in at $3,800. It's worth noting that the value of the property rises significantly as we move from RU2 to neighborhood commercial. And as much as Dr. Booth has no intention in the foreseeable or distant future of changing the use of the property, she will one day be able to sell that piece of land as neighborhood commercial. And in terms of my initial thought 2 weeks ago was forgive it all, given her efforts to play by the rules, unlike others in the community. I do know, in terms of the council contingency, that was an interesting little bit of research. Last year, we had $97,000 in that budget. Didn't use it all, so as often happens with budgets, if you don't use them, you lose them. So we're down to $79,000 this year, approximately. And I note that there is, in the capital plan, I could be wrong, potentially. The capital plan indicates a $10,000 annual budget for an arts advisory panel. And I'm not sure we have such a thing, and it's possible that we could tap that budget to help cover these shortfalls.
There would be a budget amendment required, so I think it would almost be more appropriate that, so just talking generally about council contingency, that we draw from council contingency, and should there come a need for us to increase contingency, that we then look to staff and say, okay, is there another budget then that could be drawn from, and we do it that way, rather than like, okay, let's use this and that, use that. Like, we do have a Sooke program in the arts, but their funds come specifically from buildings, from building permit revenue, a certain percentage thereof, so that is not accessible for this at all. But in this case, should council wish to pursue this or other things, that we continue to draw down the contingency. And then if it's zero and something emerges, then we look to see then where that might come from, and perhaps then there would be a more suitable location from it. But just a thought. Yeah. It's my thought. Councillor Beddoes.
Yeah, I hate to say this, but I agree with Councillor Bateman. No, all kidding aside, and it's okay to have a little fun, but I like the idea is that we forgive the $1,500 only, and that's just a show of good faith. There was some errors made somewhere, we feel, and I don't have a problem taking the $1,500 the contingency. So that'll be council's option 1. 2 is not out, and 3, I don't think that's in the plan too. So I would certainly be willing to make a motion that we forgive the $1,500 fee. Can I do that?
I think it would be more that we refund the $1,500 fee.
Sure,
Because it's been paid, is my understanding, so that council
However
refund.
it's worded. Well,
Yeah.
And that it's made up out of the contingency fund, so your department doesn't go deficient?
Yep, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre, okay. Councillor McMath?
Here we go. I just want to go back to the public consultation piece. So there is a fair bit of consultation. And so I have concerns about waiving this fee, because who's to stop every single person who's ever been rezoned from coming here and debating it? A letter was sent, there were public hearings, sometimes there's 2. There's open houses, information sessions, presentations. So while I empathize, I am hesitant, because it does set a precedent.
It might, but should anyone choose to do so, then they would need to argue and make a case and provide the relevant information as to why, where, when, how come.
So
and the
then
like.
does it become a gray area where we decide what's fair and what's not fair as far
Well,
as
that's what we're-
consultation and engagement?
Yeah, that's what we're doing. Yeah.
Right, but my preference is that it's black and white. It's not subjective, because regardless of how wonderful someone is or how terrible they are, it shouldn't change the process. It shouldn't affect it at all.
No. Councillor St. Pierre?
I think that in this particular case, there was an issue with the process. It shouldn't normally, it wouldn't normally be the case. For example, if we rezone an area and 1,000 residents are affected, the number of residents that actually would have previously gone through a rezoning application would be small. The number of residents that would be actively impacted by a new zone or new land designation that changes what they'd already done would be very, very small. This is actually not a very, and the number of people who would be treated unfairly, like we're looking at a number of different situations where first you have to be someone who's gone through a rezoning, then you have to have your zone changed through an OCP, then you have to be impacted. It's actually going to be a very small number, and at that point, these are people that, quite frankly, in some ways have been treated unfairly. They went to professionals, they went to the staff, they tried to do the right thing, they purchased a service, and then they expected they would have use of that property with this particular right for a long time, because that's what tends to happen, and then that was yanked. That's not right. And it's not likely to happen very often. I seriously doubt we're going to have a rush of people saying, whoa, what happened here? Or this is a way to make some good bank by, going through council proceedings. It really isn't. I mean, there's a lot easier ways to make $1,500. I just don't think we're going to have a gray area that's really going to exist as such, because we're really looking at a situation that's quite unique.
Through your worship to staff, how many properties in this area were rezoned along with the vet clinic?
I can't answer that. I don't have the exact numbers. There's no one here to speak to the history. We'd have to go back through all the OCP documents from 10 years ago and flush out. There may very well be some other legal non-conforming uses that, for whatever reason, might not have carried over through the zoning bylaw. And I believe in our report we speak to, like, we've actually already done a lot of the ground truthing and all the commercial highway, both on the east and west side of Sooke, with our summer student this past summer. So we've tracked everything that's existing, that's, that's known, it's got the right zoning or doesn't have the right zoning, that has licenses and don't. So we've prepped some ground truthing going forward, but looking back would be a lot more work, and so unfortunately, I don't have your answer for you, Councillor.
And then one more question. Just going back to the notification bylaw, what number of properties have to be affected in order for the District of Sooke to not have to send a letter?
10 or more.
Because I think that's bizarre, so the notification now is just to go through a posting in the newspaper?
Yes, that's correct. Individual notices do not need to be sent to zoning, but it's typically when it's a bigger issue, like it's I don't know how to.
Just in the sense of making sure everyone's crystal clear, because when I read the newspaper, it's like through Facebook. Like if there's 11 properties and there sometimes are massive ramifications for rezoning, I just want to make sure that the district is doing everything to communicate with those people. That's all. That's where I'm going with this.
I think that's a challenge. It is. In this case, like, there was a letter sent back in the time, so it's probably, in that case, it might have fit the 10 or less criteria. So that, I'm guessing, I don't know, but it's just because of the date that a letter was sent that it went out, so it's 10 or less. But that is a very, valid statement in terms of, you read the newspaper, or even when it gets delivered, like, I tend to scan and you read headlines to see what jumps out. It depends on how much time you have, and then you may or may not read the ads, You know, in part, that was why we put forward a resolution to UBCM about the need for digital means to be recognized. Because if many don't even subscribe to the Times Colonist, and right now the Sooke News Mirror isn't delivered necessarily on Wednesday all the time. So there is that gap. And then I received a number of phone calls because people are upset because they didn't realize the by-election had happened. And I'm like, I don't know what more to do. Like, didn't you read it in the paper? No. Well, I don't get it. I'm like, well, so in part, it's always that challenge, like how do we share and engage and involve, you know, and that'll be an ongoing thing to do. And then even when you scroll through the news, it's what you choose to read and what you don't. And then the ads and the notifications aren't even visible in an online digitized form. So we'd have to have pop-up ads with videos or
Yeah,
something. And even then, people would want to skip them after a minute, after a second anyway. So it's,
But for this,
Yeah.
this in particular, I just think that anytime we're going through a rezoning, we should send a letter.
well, and I think in this case, like with the OCP, and when that process kicks off, and then usually OCP is followed by the zoning bylaw, it would likely be the case where we would need to budget to send a newsletter to every single house. And then note that if there's an unregistered secondary suite, we don't know about it. It's not gonna go to that particular house. But I think that is what we would have to do, and then is really contemplate that, the budget of doing a full-on mail drop of some sort, and then at least it went to every household.
Yeah.
And people will still complain that they don't get any of their mail, and the junk mail goes right in the,
Yep.
it'll be an on thing, but it's that public notification piece, it's challenged, it is. Ms. Machado?
Thank you, Worship. Just as a reminder, we did actually consider this recently when the OCP amendment was coming forward for the gateway area for the temporary use permits. And there were 900 and some odd properties that were going to need to be notified, and the cost of notification of that was several $1,000s. So council did actually get the opportunity to consider that one and decided that because due to the cost, that we would just follow our typical notification.
But that was for the OCP amendment. Like, I'm just talking generally about a whole new OCP and a whole new zoning bylaw where everyone is impacted. Like, that would be different than an OCP amendment. Like, I think I'm drifting off of this topic, but in terms of community engagement as a whole, that would be something that we want to do. But I mean, I even get periodically, people are like, oh, we have a mayor. Oh, I didn't know that. That's wonderful. I'm like, well, how long have you lived here? Well, 5 years. And I'm like, okay, so it just comes up, right? So I'm like, you didn't notice all the signs, everything, everywhere.
Sorry, thank you, Worship. Just one thing that we can think about with the reconsideration of the OCP is we always have the tax bill that goes out every year, and we have an opportunity there to include some notification, as we did with the general election last year, and that would tend to hit most of our residents or property owners, so that we can try and time it around that.
Yeah, that would be timely, I think, to start adding a bit more. I mean, it adds a bit more to the weight, but it's something, and mail is becoming nice to get mail sometimes. Councillor St. Pierre.
Sort of following this train of thought, I'm curious, and this will be a question through your worship to staff. If the applicant had actually said, okay, here's the OCP review and I'm part of the process, and here's my letter, would they have been able to do something about the situation they're in now, or would it simply have gone on? Because my understanding is that they were in communication with staff, but there wasn't necessarily an opportunity to make any changes. So, I mean, you've just been notified, but is there an opportunity to rectify the situation? I guess is what I'm wondering.
Through your worship to Councillor St. Pierre. So the letter, I believe, was 2009, so just around the time that the OCP. But the change that occurred where the use was not carried forward was with the zoning bylaw in 2013. So there's a gap of time there where a land use designation happened through the OCP around agriculture land use designation, and the zoning bylaw where the uses were permitted under a previous zoning bylaw with the CRD, and then a new one with Sooke, and then when it changed again and again, in the subsequent zoning bylaws, that use was lost. So the OCP notification was different from when the use fell out of the book of the zoning bylaw.
Your worship, just to clarify, but my question is really, was there an opportunity, even if the notification was received, the letters in the person's hand, or was there an opportunity to rectify? The original zoning was put in at their cost. Was there actually an opportunity to rectify, regardless of the communication? Or once the mistake, or not mistake, once the new wording was put into place, was that more or less a done deal and there was no opportunity to rectify?
Through your worship, there's always an opportunity to rectify. Zoning bylaws are living documents, and we can always amend them, so.
Okay, so we do have a motion here that's been moved and seconded, and that's that council approve the offset of the OCP amendment application fee of $1,500 for PLN 01445, and that the fees be refunded from council contingency. Councillor McMath.
Through your worship, to you, staff. How much is in the council contingency?
Where are we at now?
As stated in the report, thank you, $4,235 approximately.
Okay, so this will take over a quarter.
Okay, so anything further? I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, it's carried unanimously. Okay, good discussion, more work arising. Okay,
Did you miss 11.2?
did I miss 11.2? No, that was in the consent agenda. Okay, so next up is our policy CO004 flag protocol. So, good point there about notification. If we have some way just to notify, send out a quick media release when the flag is lowered so that we all know. I think in here there was something here that noted what happens in here, which I can't find right now, but I think that's it. That is essential, just to notify why the flag has been lowered as important. A question I have is the pride flag a courtesy flag or a community flag? I don't know where to, I meant to look that up, but in terms of, in here, it was just that if we were to put in a community flag or a courtesy flag, that, and I think that's what other municipalities do, is they lower their own municipal flag and then they would raise the pride flag. So is that where the pride flag falls?
I can tell you I've been in a municipality where this is an issue of great debate. It is considered a community flag, but what I've seen happen is that when that event is occurring during Pride Week, sometimes there isn't a group that will actually come forward with the flag and make the request to actually fly it. So that's where, you know, council could decide to purchase the flag and do that if they so chose. But that's the unfortunate piece, is sometimes there's groups, in particular, the one that I had dealt with, there were people that had been bullied and they just weren't willing to come forward and ask for that flag raising. So again, that is something that council could choose to do.
Yeah, like most that I've talked to from other local governments, the council just takes the initiative to do that. So acquires the flag and does that. And so that is just something I would like to see us consider in the future. I don't think a group of people need to come and ask for that. It would just be something to do. And the other thing at one point is that while we have the Canadian flag, the BC flag, and our flag, of course, is at some point would we consider another flagpole to recognize the South's flag? That is just the missing flag, but in this case, we actually need to look at where to install a flagpole like it would be, and also to check in to see if that would be something that the Sooke would be amenable to. So that is a budgetary item because of what needs to be done there, but it would be something that I'd like us to consider doing. Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, just in policy H, I guess it is, when a half-masting is deemed appropriate, the chief administration officer or designate will notify the following by email, mayor and council, all staff for information. Maybe that's where we put another bullet to do a press release?
Yeah, just a media release for notification. It's just to add in that bullet there.
Then we got it done.
Yeah, Councillor St. Pierre? Microphone.
I was also wondering about whether or not, what to do with the Sooke flag, and do we want to approve this immediately and amend in the future, or do we want something that would actually include?
I think it would be the case of adopting the policy, and we can always amend it at a later time. And then at least we have something now that our staff can rely on and go forward, because the policy can always be amended once we've had that opportunity. Yeah. Okay, so I'll just check in with the added bullet. So would it be appropriate that we adopt this as amended then?
Yeah, we're just working on a motion to speak one moment.
Okay, so other discussion items? Okay, so and Pride Week is August? In Canada? It changes. I don't know when it's in August. I know it's in the summertime. Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, so just community groups can approach us if they have if it's non-commercial and of general interest to the community at large, and we will fly their flag, basically. Or the council will sit here and approve that application, or is that a staff?
Through your
would
worship, to
approve?
Councillor Bateman, the intent is that it would be surrounding a local event. So if, I don't know, Foot Locker had a 10K run in Vancouver, we wouldn't
No.
typically support them here. But if the Sooke Lions had a Canada Day event flag or something like that, that we would support that type of community
Right.
event.
Okay. And this is new, the courtesy flags. Have we previously had
Yes.
Oh, that's excellent. Okay.
I'm not aware of that in the past, but it's always, it was always the case of wanting to make sure that the flags look fresh, and then understanding when do we lower them, for how long, and just having that in place so that we're not scrambling to look it up, like what is the right protocol there, and then who, what, where. But it's the same thing, so if the Lions Rotary, say, hosted a conference here, then they could approach us for that in advance, but we would just need the appropriate time. Yep.
And my final thought related to, I know we flew the Sooke municipal flag in the roundabout at one point.
Yes.
Is there, this policy refers to all flags in the district on municipal land, or here at the community hall only?
How do we capture in the roundabout there?
It's right there in the purpose,
Oh.
to establish protocol for the flying of flags at the District of Sooke Municipal Hall and municipally owned properties.
Okay.
Perfect.
Of
Okay.
course. Thank you.
The challenge there is that it was, with the wind, it was starting to bend a bit, but it looked really good there. It was.
Maybe we can get a Cambodian.
Don't even go there. Oh, my good grief. It's our flag. Anyway. Okay, so in terms of the pride flag, would that be a separate resolution there? Or there is, as we were waiting, there was sort of a comment that councillors would like to see us acquire pride flag and fly it during Pride Week.
Because of the sensitive nature of that, I would like to come back to council with some very specific wording
Okay.
recommended. So I think council could just make a second resolution to direct
Direct
staff
staff
to
to
bring
report
back
back?
an amendment to include the rainbow flag.
Okay, so here it is then that council adopt policy C0004 flag protocol as amended with the addition of media release as a third bullet to third H. So looking for a mover by Councillor Beddoes, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. All those in favor Opposed is carried unanimously, and that council requests staff to bring a report back on the rainbow flag. Moved by Councillor McMath, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. All those in favor, opposed, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Good grief. I have a bit of a cold. Yes, that's my excuse. Okay, so bylaws 13.1, here for adoption, we have zoning amendment bylaw numbers 7 through 8, 600-72, 2019, 2365 Church Road. And that is that council adopt the bylaws cited as zoning amendment bylaws 7 through 8, 600-72, 2019. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Beddoes. All those in favor or discussion? Sorry, Councillor Bateman.
So, we did hear from the residents at our September 9th,
Just to,
yeah.
because the public hearing is closed and we can't entertain new materials.
Oh, okay.
What I can share is that parking and the like would be addressed at the development permit, which will come to council. So there will be further opportunity for those comments to be made.
Okay.
Then, Ms. Campbell?
What would come to council is a variance permit, if a
Variance
variance is needed, which we expect that there will be one needed. But a development permit on its own, in this case, would not. just
Okay.
Unless there's a variance permit.
Okay, so a development permit would be issued unless a variance is needed, then it comes to us. But at this point, Ms. Machado, is there anything that Councillor Bateman can comment on? But we're at adoption here.
Yeah, not really. When it's at adoption, it's
Okay.
just that.
Okay. So I'll call the question on adoption. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay, item 13.2. This is that council adopt the bylaws cited as council remuneration and benefits bylaw number 740, 2019. Moved by Councillor McMath, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. All those in favor? Opposed? Is carried unanimously. Fees amendment bylaw. So council adopt the bylaws cited as fees amendment bylaw number 746, 488-04, 2019. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Beddoes. All those in favor? Opposed? Is carried unanimously. Wastewater development cost charges expenditure bylaw 749. So this we would do together. We received a report on the centrifuge, and this now is allocating where those funds will be expended from.
Through your worship, so council did already authorize that the award be made for the centrifuge. But because the centrifuge was not in the 5-year plan, financial plan, a bylaw expenditure or authorizing the expenditure is required. So that's what's in front of you today.
So I thought that we had budgeted $800,000.
I believe that was in 2020.
It was, but where we're getting the funds from has changed. It was originally $800,000 and we were going to borrow the funds. And now
Okay.
the process has changed and we're going to purchase the equipment this year and have, as came up at the last meeting, use DCC funding instead of obtaining a loan to pay for the equipment.
But I guess the good news is that the equipment is significantly less than what we had originally anticipated, like 800,000 versus 443,000.
Final costs will still be determined, but the 800,000 included purchasing and installing it in
I
1
see.
year. So there will be, in 2020, a cost for installing the equipment. We just don't know the final numbers yet at this point.
Okay, but we'll get that information back. It would just be nice to see.
Correct, yeah, it'll be included in the 2020 budget process.
Okay, so the resolution or the recommendation is that council give first, second, and third reading to the bylaws cited as development cost charge expenditure bylaw number 749, 2019. Moved by Councillor McMath, seconded by Councillor Bateman. All those in favor? Okay. So, yeah, it's the sneezing now. That's fun. Okay, so there's no new business items, so council verbal reports.
I just wanted to say that I found the UBCM trip to be very, very worthwhile. Just the fact alone to hear Peter Mansbridge confirm that the public does indeed very concerned about the future when it comes to climate change. So that alone convinced me that I have to be more active in planning for the future for my grandchildren. So I found it very, very worthwhile. It was an honor to see our mayor elected to the UBCM presidency, and it was great to be there with my colleagues and discuss a number of matters and go to a mushroom farm, and it was good. It was well done, and I very, very much enjoyed it, and I thought it was very worthwhile.
Thank you, Councillor. Other councillors? Councillor Bateman?
Okay, well, yeah, I would echo Councillor Beto's comments there about UBCM. It was fascinating, immersive, exhausting, for me anyway, experience. And it was wonderful to be, a representative of Sooke, because here was our mayor being anointed as president. The premier was there as our MLA. It's a very rare and good moment for Sooke that we have over this next 12 months, and you'll be past president after that. So again, I saw that UBCM is a pretty remarkable organization. It has any number of working groups, and I missed the opportunity to speak around council remuneration, but I did get some materials from a new UBCM report that was released with best practices for moving forward with they've recommended best practice independent task force to look at future remuneration issues to be established at least a year before the next election. Of course, this was what the late Councillor Parkinson recommended to us, an independent task force to look at these things. And there are any number of other things I could talk about, and I think we're going to dedicate part of the Committee of the Whole to UBCM download. Yeah.
We do like to do that at an upcoming meeting, Committee of the Whole, because of the information sharing that does come out of that. We were all trying to divide and conquer the conference. So checking in as to who was going where, what, and when at every given time to cover everything off.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll stop on UBCM. And I also was chosen by the fire department to go and spend half a day as a firefighter. Boyhood dream. And, I got to use the jaws of life to crack open a car door, and but that's what happened. Put out a blaze. I put on breathing apparatus and started. Anyway, that was a panicky moment. So I did get a sense that these people are heroes for a reason, and more power to them, within reason, of course. Also, I attended the Keynes Family Park Staircase official opening. There were 3 classes of students joined us for that. Councillor Logan's, Acting Mayor Logan's, had to do 2 ribbon cuttings to satisfy the masses. And I think one of the teachers, Liz Stannard, made it clear that this Keynes Family Park Staircase will be a regular part of class activities and beachcombing exercises. And finally, I went to the Vancouver Island Regional Library Board meeting on September 21st in Nanaimo, and was able to report that the district staff and Viral are moving forward. We're now at I think the 4th iteration of the lease agreement and title transfer. I think it's going to be a 99-year lease. So we are getting close to council receiving this lease agreement, and once that's agreed upon and we vote in favor of it, if indeed we do, then Viral will be in a position to put forward their development permit application. And their feeling was that there might even be shovels in the ground by, I don't want to jinx it, so I won't say, but maybe late this year even. So I also, elected Regional Director Hicks was at the meeting as well, and he noted quite rightly that the very long delay over this project was a little embarrassing, and he was kind of fed up by this process. The Viral's executive director first visited the district in 2008, and so I piped up in the positive reframe always, is that that this was not an embarrassment, it's a process. And it's taken a while to get the land organized. Until we purchased Lot A, we did not have, anyway, it's been a long process and a very good process, thanks to the work of our manager of planning, Ivy Campbell, and CAO McInnes has also stepped in and really, as our acting CAO and our CAO prior to that, have all done good work in getting us to this stage. So, that's it from me. And I want to hear about Megan's RCMP ride about.
Thank you, Councillor Bateman. So to Councillor McMath.
I'll briefly touch on UBCM just because I always thought it was like a little bit of a party trip. But going there with so many other councillors and mayors from similar towns, very different towns, the networking and the information that I collected from that was super corny, priceless. Like it was amazing just to sit. You have breakfast and all of a sudden you're engaging council remuneration, DCCs, all of these topics where everyone was at the same table and you got so much information. You didn't have to go through a process. You didn't have to have a report come through. It was all these ideas that you collected. The other piece of that is of all the resolutions, and there were many of them, some of them were unsuccessful or successful just off a few votes. So having those bodies there made a huge difference in what was advocated for and what wasn't. And that's everything from sexual assault clinics to tax exemptions to development standards, all of those things that have massive ramifications for municipalities. So it was so worthwhile being there, but I had to go to it to experience it to really get that. And yes, I did go on a night shift right along with the RCMP. Incredibly eye-opening. It's a job that I could not do. I did enjoy shooting a taser gun and wearing a bulletproof vest. But I learned so much. And when we talk about downloading, it is everywhere. And I went with Heidi Sherman, who I fondly refer to as a Shermanator. And she was amazing. She was like an encyclopedia, so she went through every process. So if we went to a call, she explained the code, what the call was for, all of the paperwork they have to complete. There's so much minutia, the process, all the way from the courts to the lawyers to the end result. And I encourage the rest of my council to go. Worth it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor St. Pierre.
Well, I can only repeat that UBCM was quite the experience, up at 6, 7 o'clock. Get to bed around 9, 10 or later, depending on how much of a party animal you are, which I am not, by the way. Lots to learn, huge amounts, concurrent sessions on multiple topics of interest, so many people to meet and talk to. I had the opportunity to speak with our Minister of Agriculture, Lana Popham, and her staff, along with Mayor Tate, Ebony, Councillor Loggins, and our CAO, Norm McInnes. It's an unheard of opportunity to talk to people who actually get to make policy on a provincial level on things that affect Sooke directly. I was able to say, we don't have any big farms in Sooke. Why are all our regulations aimed at big farms? We only have small farms. And I was heard, and that was pretty amazing, pretty powerful. I have never felt more fortunate to be a councillor and to have an opportunity like that to actually talk to people who can actually make those huge decisions that affect not just Sooke, but all across BC. So yes, quite the experience. Glad to be back, though. Wow. I was also participating in the Climate Caucus group of local government people in BC, but also across Canada, that are trying to push forward climate adaptation mitigation policy, trying to figure out what we can do together that's most effective. Quite a few people, actually, I think most of the people at this table went to the Orange Shirt event and the Green New Deal that was happening this last Sunday. Powerful events. Sooke is really stepping forward to do a lot of different things in terms of, again, adaptation mitigation work. And it's actually local people getting together to figure out what they want to do. And that's awfully nice to see, and we hope to be able to work with them.
Excellent. So thank you very much, councillors. I'm glad that you found it to be a productive week. I thought 7 is late to be up, you know, clinics. Anyway, I had to chair one, so I had to start at 7:50. My day started a little earlier than that, but that's okay. All of the materials will be available on the UBCM website. There is also a Compass newsletter that anyone can subscribe to. It comes out Wednesday just afternoon. So every week this shows sort of what the highlights on the various folios are, and it just gives a very brief, and then you can click and get into the full article. The resolutions will then, because we didn't get through all of them, will then go to executive to be debated as they come in. And then they get forwarded on to the province, and then the provincial response to the resolutions will also be on the website. So if you even go back to previous years, like what happened to this resolution, then you'll see the response. So what this does is it starts to guide UBCM policy. And so some of them would be, well, what was the point of that? Well, ferries was a big deal. When ferry fares were increasing and routes were being canceled or cut or delayed, that was a big deal for island communities. So an emergent policy paper came forward at UBCM to make those changes. We're starting to see that shift a little bit. Another one was we wanted, at the time, the membership said we don't want to see big corporate donations, union donations in local government elections anymore. That change occurred, and the legislation has evolved at campaign contributions and what's acceptable and what the limits are set at. So those sorts of things had an immediate action there. Another moving file is cannabis revenue. So as I said in my opening comments, the federal government had had increased the provincial share, the provincial revenue by 25% on the understanding that cannabis revenue would come back to local governments. Well, so far only Quebec is doing this transfer, no other provinces yet. So our colleagues at the FCM are pushing for a better arrangement with the federal government, but at the same time, we're still advocating for ours. And so in the Premier's closing remarks, he did say that they will be advancing work on this file, and to state it seemed positive. There was a positive movement that they will be responding to local government ask on that, and also moving through with the regulation and compliance a lot faster, because we know that the revenue is going to increase over time. We want to get our foot in the door. So those are some examples, and obviously there is a special committee on climate action that the UBCM has struck. They will be delving into what is the particular local government action points that will emerge on this, in addition to all the other work that's happening. Another one on accessibility in the built environment. So the push from Health and Social Development has been, okay, if you're starting to change the built environment and building code, local government needs to be at the table, because we want to say, okay, this is the impact and this is how it's fitting in our environment. So those are just some of the examples, but I recommend you subscribe to the newsletter so that you have it. Anyone can subscribe to it, and then you can see how those things advance going forward. So more on that to come. And I'll also share, as you know, today, September 30th, is Orange Shirt Day. So that's why many of us are wearing orange shirts. It's to recognize survivors of residential schools. Sooke did have an event yesterday, and also to support the Rotary Club of both Sooke and International. I also did proclaim this as World Polio Day, and there was a proclamation that went out. Rotary is very active in trying to eradicate polio from them. So that came from our local organization, and I participated in the golf tournament. It was nice after UBCM to get out and about, and I scored an awesome 54, which I think is like the worst possible score you can get. But that's okay. I was an improvement from last year. by not much. And there is a federal all candidates debate coming up on October the 12th that I will be moderating. 11th, Friday the 11th, not the 12th. The 11th at EMCS in the evening. The intent here would be to hear directly in a non-confrontational way what each candidate is standing for, as well as their party, with a focus on Sooke in particular. And almost all of the candidates have confirmed their attendance, and the organizers are gearing this to the undecided voters, those who are still trying to decide who they want to vote for. So that is sponsored by the Sooke Region Chamber of Commerce and the Sooke Multi-Belief Initiative. And Councillor St. Pierre?
Tiny last parting comment. Our Premier John Horgan gives great speeches, but as he was finishing his speech, he pointed out that we have a perfect storm where we have the president of UBCM is our mayor, he's the MLA, and we can expect Sooke to become the new capital of BC. I don't know if it's a threat or a promise, but there it is.
Yeah, that was kind of amusing. Yes. Okay, so on that note, I think that brings us to the end. There are no further, rise and reports to announce. So motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, second by Councillor McMath. All those in favor? Opposed? Is carried unanimously. And we will see you for our next regular meeting, which will be after Thanksgiving on the 15th, which is a Tuesday at 7. So until then, happy Thanksgiving, and we look forward to welcoming our new councillor to the table on that day.